Day one, baby.
Day one.
To this day.
To this day. To this day.
To this day.
Motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
We heard again yesterday saying that a fight with you against a Wilder or Fury would be a 50-50 split. That's how it would be now. Is that you've accepted that now, that in your head that's to make them fights that it would have to be that kind of split?
I'll just ask, what's his reasoning?
Didn't really give a reason, but I'm assuming
it was like when like Andy was champion and he won the belts and was having issues about where it was. There was a lot of uproar to say Andy's a champion, he should decide where it was. Andy's not the champion. Do you know what I mean? So there is that aspect. You have to listen to what people say. So there is that aspect of when you're one of the driving forces in the heavyweight division, you do have a bit more of a say. So every time I now get the belt, it's like, shh, 50-50 or...
Are you saying it shouldn't be 50-50 then?
I'm saying that if you explain why, everything takes explanation. I don't understand why it should be at the minute. You know what I mean?
Does it have something to do with the fact that you have been beaten now?
No. Well, it was if it was the biggest upset of 2019 and I came back in December, that must be the biggest comeback. So I now want it. I want it all. I want 70%. I just made the biggest comeback that the world's seen. Like I said, I made the biggest comeback of last year and I would like 70%, but in reality I know that's not the case. So what they would have to do with me, with my ego on my side, saying I want 70%, now I explain and say, look, that's not really the case. That's not where we are right now in terms of splits. This is why, that's why. These are the stats and facts. And then I'll say, you know what, that makes sense to me. It has to make sense.
So you have to be told and explain exactly why that warrants a 50-50 split with either Wilder or Fury for you to consider that.
Not so much consider, but just for it to make sense in my head. It's got to be right in your head. I'm going into fight. I'm going into war, innit? And I want to know what I'm warring for. When England goes and conquers a country, or America goes and conquers a country, they know what they're going in there for. You have to know exactly what you're going in for. And that's just how everything goes in life. You'd like to know what you're going for.
The answer that Anthony Joshua was looking for when it comes to what Eddie Hearn said, because Anthony Joshua wants someone to make it make sense, because
it doesn't.
At first glance, it really doesn't. And the answer that he's looking for is, Eddie Hearn said in plain English that he doesn't necessarily think that the winner of the fight deserves 50%, but in order to make the fight happen, that might be what it takes, because you know what they want, you know what they're asking for, and they don't seem to want to get into the ring unless that's what it's going to be for. That's the logic that Eddie Hearn was employing when he made those comments about a 50-50 split between Anthony Joshua and the winner of that fight.
That's what he said.
But from where Anthony Joshua was sitting, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because so much was made of his initial loss to Andy Ruiz.
Big upset.
You know, it being one of the biggest upsets in postmodern boxing, and how if there is a comeback, then that comeback would have to be equal in magnitude to the upset. That if this was one of the biggest upsets, then this must be one of the biggest comebacks. Because, you know what? A lot of people did write Anthony Joshua off. A lot of professional boxers told him that he shouldn't even go into an immediate rematch. That it's disaster. That's what he's courting, disaster. Anyone from Amir Khan to George Foreman. You know, that he shouldn't have an immediate rematch. But that's what he did. And he put on the most dominant performance he has in recent memory against a guy who dropped him 4 times in their first fight. That's what happened, folks. These are not anecdotes. These are simple matters of fact. So from where Anthony Joshua is sitting, having done everything that he's done, gone through everything that he's gone through, you have to make it make sense if you want me to give one of these guys 50%, because as it stands, it really doesn't make sense. Given what I'm coming from, I'm in a position where I could ask for 70% of the pot. I sympathize with that hierarchy of thought. I agree with it, because this is a numbers game at its base. We're not talking about breaking down a fight. We're not talking about who you think would win. We're talking about
facts and stats.
The wheels that go into motion before there even is a fight. The mathematics of it, the finance of it. And based on finance, it doesn't make financial sense to give either Tyson Fury 50% of the pot or Deontay Wilder 50% of the pot when we see what those fighters generate on their own, and we see what this guy generates on his own, devoid of a big name opponent. We put them all on equal footing with the same circumstances, and one guy consistently generates more numbers than the aforementioned two. So on what grounds should he give up leverage to them? Perhaps it is them who are being unrealistic, and that's why he needs someone to make it make sense, because as it stands, it really doesn't make sense. Deontay Wilder, in his last fight, right here in America,
He's been fighting for like 10 or 11 years.
at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, a venue that seats approximately 17,000. Deontay Wilder only sold 7,000 tickets. He didn't sell that thing out. He didn't sell half of that goddamn thing out, okay? His pay-per-view buys weren't astronomical. There's nothing major, nothing to write home about. Somewhere between 138,000 to 275,000 based on the reports, okay? Because there were several numbers floating around. The median number being, 225,000? But better still, nothing to write home about, nothing major, and nothing on the level of what Anthony Joshua does in his own backyard, let alone globally, which is what he is. He's a global star. I said this before, I'll say it again. You notice that the Saudi Arabians put up big money to be able to host Anthony Joshua's last fight. Yet those same Saudi Arabians, we don't see them putting up big money for Wilder versus Fury 2. We don't see that.
Nope.
We didn't see them put up big money for Wilder versus Ortiz 2. We didn't see that either.
Nope.
But we are hearing that they'll put up big money for Anthony Joshua versus the winner of that fight. When it comes to that fight, they aren't putting up big money for it, but they'll pay big money if the winner of that fight fights Anthony Joshua. He's the common denominator. He's the moneymaker. He's the guy they're interested in, you understand?
Not y'all.
This is a level of celebrity, a level of drawing power that neither Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury exhibits. We've been looking at Fury's ticket sales since he crossed over the top rank, and we've been looking at Wilder's ticket sales throughout. And neither of these two guys are putting up the kind of numbers that Anthony Joshua is. So from where he's sitting, giving these guys, given what they put up on their own, from where he's sitting, it doesn't make sense to give them 50%. You have to make it make sense. You have to give him a reason. But as it stands, I really don't think there is one. I understood Eddie Hearn's logic, though. I understood what he meant. That in order to make the fight, given what their demands are, that might be the only way to do it. Because these guys don't seem to want to fight unless you give them a deal that's too good to be true. I understand that. But I also understand that this is a numbers game. So when you look at the numbers, you look at Tyson Fury's numbers for his last two fights, kind of ticket sales this guy put up, because neither one of those fights were pay-per-views here in America, but that's where they were staged, under the Top Rank banner. What kind of turnout did he get when he fought? Tell you what kind of turnout. He only sold about 5,489 tickets when he fought Tom Schwartz.
Jeez.
That's it. That's all he sold. And that didn't even generate $1 million. It came in at just under $1 million.
About 800,000.
Okay, you look at what he generated for the Otto Valine fight. 18%.
Only.
18% of a 20,000 capacity venue. And he only generated about 18% of that. Okay? The announced attendance was about 8,000. But the actual tickets that got sold, not tickets that got comped and tickets that got sold, the amount of tickets that actually got sold was something to the tune of
What for this?
3,577 tickets. That's less than he sold for the Tom Schwartz fight. And this is the guy who's demanding that I give him half? You look at Wilder and it's no better. You look at Wilder, it's no better. 7,000 tickets sold. 7,000 at a venue that seats over 16,000. Over 16,000.
Break.
You guys can't sell, you know? Wilder's got no excuse. He's been fighting in America for the longest time, but he can't seem to sell out on his own. Your last fight was at a venue, the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, that can house about 16,000, a little over 16,000 to 17,000. How many tickets do you sell in your backyard where you've got all the advantages? Only 7,000. That's all you can do. So why should I give half to you when we all know that I'm the draw? I don't know about you guys, but that sounds like a perfectly legitimate question to me based on the numbers, because before a fight gets made, this is what goes into it. The significance of these numbers cannot be understated. When it's based on these numbers that terms get ironed out. You got a lot of Wilder fans They don't like the way the cookie's crumbling because it's not crumbling in their guy's favor. But the reality is, your guy's doing what he's doing. Those are the numbers he's putting up. And those numbers are dwarfed by the numbers that Anthony Joshua is putting up.
It is what it is.
So we're hearing news that the Saudi Arabians have put up a massive site offer to host the undisputed heavyweight championship. And to Eddie Hearn, they've already tried to offer these guys 60-40, and they've turned that down. So it seems that the only way to go about making the fight is to offer them an even split. But he's got to get approval from the boss. And who's the boss? According to Eddie Hearn, it's Anthony Joshua. But we just heard what Anthony Joshua said. We just heard that, from where he's sitting, you've got to make that make sense. Likely because, well, from where he's sitting, it doesn't. So now that we've mulled over the varying grotesqueries of these negotiations, what could be these negotiations? Now that we've mulled over the facts, the stats, and the numbers as they are, we've established that Anthony Joshua is a bigger draw anywhere in the world than these two guys, even here in America. That fight in Madison Square Garden drew about 20,000 people. I don't care where they came from to buy a ticket, so long as they bought a ticket, because that's the point. Who can generate more money when they fight? It's clearly Anthony Joshua. The relevance of that cannot be understated, because this is what goes into making a fight. This doesn't get ironed out, ladies and gentlemen. You have no fight. Oh. So we've gone over all of that. And it then becomes a question of, we're always talking about Anthony Joshua's side of things.
Doesn't matter what I say, that gets taken out into context. All I want to do is sit down and have a proper meeting and see where we can pencil this fight in, bro. Wilder's a solid fighter. He's a dangerous fighter. There's no denying that. It's not like I'm saying, I want to fight. It's one of the most easy ones out there. You've never heard me say that. Wilder is a solid, dangerous fighter. And I want to take that challenge because he's in his prime. I'm in my prime. And it's the one, honestly, I hear the boxing fans screaming for. And it's the one that I want, hence why I've got 4 of the major world title belts. And I want the last one.
But how bad does Wilder want this fight?
Huh?
How bad does Fury want this fight?
Huh?
Are you willing to let it pass you by because you can't get half? Is that going to be the holdup? You're willing to let the fight pass you by because of that? Let me tell you something. 40%, hell, even 35% of an Anthony Joshua fight is worth more than going half with the other guy, with Wilder. 35% of an Anthony Joshua fight is worth substantially more to you than 50% a Wilder fight or a Fury fight. You guys have let your powers combine before, and we saw what kind of numbers you put up. It's a nice effort, but it's still not in the neighborhood of this guy. Even at 35%, you stand to make more money with Joshua than you would with Wilder or Fury if you did it at 50-50. If you did it at 50%. So you gotta wonder, do those guys really want the fight? Or is it just, they don't really want to fight so much as they just want to get paid? That's really what it is. You don't actually want to fight him and beat him. You just want to get paid. That's really your biggest concern. That's what it looks like. I mean, from where I've been sitting, that's what it always looked like. That they're not thinking about what's on the other side of that fight. They're not thinking about where they go from there. The road stops for them at that fight because that's how they're treating the situation, that they will not enter in the ring with this man unless he gives them 50%, even though they're not entitled to that, and their numbers, their drawing power, does not suggest, does not give a precedence for them to have those kinds of demands. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with these guys that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, take Tyson Fury. He'll tell you things like Deontay Wilder would knock out Anthony Joshua in 2 rounds. What he's communicating is that Wilder is the more dangerous opponent, and that's the more dangerous fight. That's the fight he's about to have for the second time, Tyson Fury. You accepted that fight. But one of my hang-ups is, okay, if all of that is true, and you really feel that way, then why would you have so many reservations about fighting Anthony Joshua? According to you, that's the easier fight, isn't it? According to you, you beat that guy easy peasy lemon squeezy. But you have all these reservations when it comes to him, and the same is true of Wilder. Got all these reservations of Anthony Joshua, yet this is a guy who's supposed to be a cakewalk for you, a walk in the park. Yet you guys won't fight him. You won't fight him for anything less than 50%, even though 40%, hell, 30% of a Joshua fight is more than you're about to make with each other. Ask me, if you really believe that shit, you'd settle up on 40%, go in there and knock him out as easily as you want people to believe you'd knock him out. But that's just it. You guys don't believe that, and I don't believe you. You know, I understand both sides of the coin. from where Eddie Hearn is sitting, he just wants to get the fight made. I mean, they've been at it long enough, and we know what the value of the fight is. We know what it means for the division. We know what it would mean for the sport of boxing. That is a fight that the world would stop to watch. So he wants to iron out the terms for that. What he's basically saying is that given how these guys have been acting, it seems like the only way we can make the fight is if we offer them half. But Anthony Joshua does appear to feel another way about it, that why should I give them half? You have to make it make sense, because as it stands, the only real argument that anybody's hearing is they should get half just because they're asking for it.
Is that it?
Painstakingly chasing down world titles, unifying them against world champions, taking on top contender after top contender. I mean, neither Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder have fought as many divisional top 10 fighters as Anthony Joshua has. Putting in all this legwork to be upset by Andy Ruiz only to rally one of the biggest comebacks in postmodern boxing. You do all this. You go through all this so that you can give up half to these two guys, one guy who only actually sold 3,000 tickets, a little over 3,000 tickets in his last fight, or another guy who's been fighting at home for 10 or 11 years, yet all he could sell in his last fight was 7,000 tickets at a venue that seats
16,000.
a little over 16,000. And you're going to give those guys half? Look, that's just not realistic. It's not realistic. And I don't know anyone in their right mind
Who would
look at those numbers and formulate the idea that either Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder are entitled to half. At minimum, 40% should have been enough, because 40% is very generous for either of those two guys. I think a 60-40 split, 60 for Anthony Joshua, 40 for the winner of that fight, I think that split makes more sense than anything else. But let's not even kid ourselves. The numbers for that fight, they're not even in yet. We don't know if this thing's going to be a success. We don't know if it's going to be a flop. We don't know what they're going to generate at the live gate. We don't know that they're going to sell this thing out to capacity. Nobody knows what the pay-per-view buys are, especially in this unstable market. I mean, until you have those numbers, you really don't have an accurate point of reference as to what the winner of this fight deserves to get for fighting Anthony Joshua. You just don't have the numbers. The facts aren't even there yet. But the facts that are there, the kind of numbers that these guys have been putting up, fight by fight, since they fought each other, they tell the story of two guys that really don't deserve half and shouldn't even be demanding that. And that's always been the case. So if Anthony Joshua feels so inclined to question Eddie Hearn's commentary about offering an even split to these two guys, I just so happen to agree. Not only is he in possession of more world titles than them, but he's a bigger draw globally than them. And you don't just run around giving up that kind of leverage to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. You don't put in that kind of legwork to get to that point just to sacrifice half to these two parasites.